Hello, real estate investors. REI Funding Partners coming to you again today with another educational video. Today is on the topic of transactional funding. Big topic, big money to be made. Let's jump right in. So first, let's talk about what transactional funding is before we talk about what it is that we do here at REI Funding Partners. So transactional funding typically comes into play when you have double closings for real estate investors. Let's face it, assignments are just not as easy or attractive as they used to be, especially in our home state of Alabama. There's been recent legal changes that are starting to take effect here in the fall of 2024, and it's just more attractive in many cases to do double closings than to do assignments. When you have a double close, you as the wholesaler actually take title to the property. Instead of doing the assignment, you're actually buying the property from your seller and selling the property to your end buyer. And when we do a double close like this, it happens in the same day. So it could be literally back to back, and that's one of the names for this, back-to-back closings, or at least in the same day. You might have one closing in the morning and one in the afternoon, but that's kind of what we're talking about when we say double close. Now, let's talk about this A to B and B to C for a moment, because that's very common language in this. So the A to B part of the closing is when you're buying from the seller. So the seller is the A party, you are the B party. You're buying it from your seller. So then the B to C is when you as the B party are selling to your end buyer. They're the C party. And then when we talk about wet versus dry closing, we're going to use a little bit of that language again. So a dry closing is when you don't bring any funds to the closing. So remember, you're the B party in the middle of this A to B and B to C transaction. But if it's a dry closing, you're not bringing any money in. What happens in that case? You're literally using the cash that comes into closing from the C buyer to handle everything. And for a long time, that works. In some states, that still works. But in many cases, a wet closing is required. So instead of in a dry closing where the C buyer, the funds, pays for everything, a wet closing means that you actually have funds there. So that's one place that transactional funding can come in and make the difference. So a lender, like the transactional funding that we do, we would send the money into the closing in for you in the middle, making it a wet closing. So you would actually have funds coming into the title company or the escrow company on your behalf for your part of the loan, and it would all be official. You'd have the money in and then the money back out when you complete all the closing. So transactional funding is very important, again, in part because of changing regulations, but also there's just some cases where the B party, in many cases the wholesaler, they're making so much money on their part of it. They did such a fantastic job of negotiating that A to B deal that they don't really want their C buyer to know how much they're making. And if it's an assignment, your C buyer is going to know. But if you do this A to B, B to C double closing, then really they're not privy to the A to B closing document. So they know what you bought it for. They just know what you're selling it to them for. So who needs the transactional funding? Wholesalers mostly, but it could be wholesalers if they don't have the cash to fund that entire transaction. If it's a $150,000 A to B purchase price and you either don't have the liquidity available or you just don't have that much cash at the moment. You're growing your business. You don't have $150,000 sitting around. Having a lender that will fund in the transactional funding can be helpful. Or again, if you just don't want to do a contract assignment, transactional funding can facilitate that back-to-back or double close. So here's how we help. our process for transactional funding really just looks like this. You send the deal information to us so that we can have the basics of what the transaction looks like. We'll get back to you with the paperwork that's needed. So the term sheet for the cost of funds, the escrow instructions would go into the title company, and then on the day of closing, we wire the funds in on your behalf. The transaction gets wrapped up, and the title company wires the funds back to us. So it's really that straightforward, and it's something that we like to do to help out wholesalers. So if you need transactional funding for your deals, if you haven't done it before or you haven't had good success with transactional funding, we're very, very professional, very fast, very repeatable to work with. We have lots of 5-star reviews, and that's because we take the time to have good relationships with people and give great customer support. So it's really as easy as 1, 2, 3 to get your transactional funding in place for your next deal if you need that. Thanks. Short video this time, but straight to the point on what transactional funding is, how it's used, and what we can do to help out. All of our contact information is here as far as reaching out to us or following along with what we do on the socials. So be sure to reach out with us there, connect, and we'll be glad to help you out any way we can. Until next time, thank you, take care, and God bless.